Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. My name is Michelle, I'm part of the TribalHub team, and we are here today on our webinar from Checkboxes to Business Value, the Tribal Enterprise Guide to Strategic Cybersecurity. While you are entering the room, if you wouldn't mind showing us or using the chat to tell us where you're from, that would be amazing. I always love, it's my favorite part. I know I say this every time, but it's my favorite part about being on these webinars is just seeing where everyone's, coming in from. So, hey, Travis, Herb, two of my favorite people. Love it. I am at our Gaylord TribalHub office today. So Chad's here. Look at you guys all dialing in. That's awesome. All right, well, San Diego. Oh, probably a little bit nicer in San Diego than it is here in Northern Michigan right now. All right, let's get this show on the road, you guys. Again, welcome to our webinar today. It's presented by Bird Rock Systems. We have three amazing presenters today, Fabio, Stephen, and Jeremy. They'll introduce themselves when they start the presentation. This webinar is going to be recorded and it will be on the TribalHub website. Everyone here on the call will get an email tomorrow with a link to that recording. If you'd like to share that with anybody on your team who maybe couldn't make it today, that would be wonderful. Couple of learning objectives to think about while you're going through the webinar today. Make sure, as always, that you're using that chat box or even the Q&A. If you have a question or anything you'd like to ask the presenters, please make sure you do that and don't miss this opportunity. And then just one shameless plug here for our next event we have coming up, the Cybersecurity Summit, happening in February in Jacksonville. And what a better place to spend Florida than in February than in Florida. So hopefully we can see some of you there. And now I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to our Bird Rock team.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Let me share my screen really quick. Oh, wait, wrong screen. Let me see. No, this one.
The joys of live presentations, right?
Yep.
Technology, right?
Can you guys see that all right?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank everybody from joining from wherever you are. We have a really great presentation for you today. On the line, we have Jeremy Rouse, who's a Bird Rock CISO. We also have Fabio Velardo from Brazil. He's coming to us from Brazil, and he's our systems engineer. And then we also have Stephen, I'm going to mess up your last name too, Goodrolt from
It's very close.
Yeah, okay, great. He's coming from Singapore, and he's our compliance and cloud evangelist at Gigamon. So really great conversations to be had today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll kind of call it out for our presenters here. We also have an opportunity for you guys to be entered into a raffle at the end for a $500 gift card, and all you have to do is fill out a long survey. So stay on the line for that at the end, and I'll share that with you guys. But for now, I'll pass it over to Jeremy.
Thank you, Ariel. All right, can you go to the next slide? All right, so introductions. Each of us will introduce ourselves, tell you a little bit about us before we start going into our slides. I'm Jeremy Rouse. I've been with Bird Rock Systems for about 12 years as a virtual CISO. Been in the industry for about 26. So been around the block. I do a lot of work with Indian gaming, a lot of tribal casinos in the Southwest region of the United States. I've got a lot of experience in that area. Now, why are we here today? We're here today to talk a little bit about some of the threats and risks that we've seen with casinos. It's no surprise that casinos are a high target. There's been about, on average, um, you know, almost $5 million per hack with casinos, right? And why is that? Casinos, they pull in about 44 billion in revenue a year. There's a lot of ecosystem that goes into casinos, and casinos are a little different, as you all are aware. Due to sovereignty, there's not a lot of the compliance regulations put on to casinos like there are in public and private sectors. So there can be a little bit, let's say, of a gap with security within the tribal casinos, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so we did talk a little bit about high value targets, right? Casinos, high value targets, they deal with money, they deal with data, right? Both of those are value to the bad guys. There's a lot of it in casinos, so it's no surprise that casinos are going to be a high target. Additionally, as casinos evolve with technology, technology introduces a risk in itself. For example, we have smart devices. Anything that's smart is typically talking to something else, right? And we're bringing a lot of that technology into our casinos. We're trying to be competitive. We're trying to digitally transform the way that we are conducting our operations. And that just introduces more and more risk to casinos. Let's go to the next slide. So cyber attacks. There's been a good number of attacks, incidents, let's call those, over the last 5 years. I've only got a few of them up here. We won't go into great detail on some of them, but I don't think it's any surprise. We've heard a lot of this in the news. If you're in the tribal community, you probably get a lot of alerts and conversations every time there's a casino that's in the headlines. Cache Creek is one that comes to mind. That was a big one here in the Southern California area that caused a lot of casinos to start thinking differently about the way that they're conducting their cybersecurity, the way that they're doing compliance. So bottom line here is that from a business impact perspective, there's two ways to look at this. We can look at it from a quantitative or a qualitative, however you want to examine the impact financially on a casino. It's going to be high risk. These casinos are typically 24/7 shops. Being down for just a few hours can be substantial loss. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so we did talk a little bit about financial loss. Like we said, on average, it's almost 5 million an incident. And that's kind of a wide average. It can be different for different organizations, different casinos. Operational disruption is huge, right? We've seen what it does to MGM, right? People were locked out of their rooms. So I've seen where gas stations are no longer operational, hotels are being affected, right? Typically, a lot of these casinos are all striving to have compete with one another, and that means we've got golf courses, right? We've got gas stations, we've got hotels, and much more. And so all of this gets disrupted whenever there's a cyber incident. Reputational loss, customer loss, right? Nobody wants to be in the news. Nobody wants to be sanctioned because they didn't follow a certain protocol that was defined by the NIGC or some tribal commission. This is an area that we've seen firsthand with casinos being down for a period of time. And then, as most of things have a tendency to roll downhill. So even though we bring a lot of this to the attention of upper management, or let's say a tribal committee, sometimes they don't always understand the impacts of cybersecurity. So that's why it's very important for us to be having those conversations with them especially around loss and business impact as it relates to financial loss. Let's go to the next slide. So when we talk about vulnerabilities in casinos, here's what we're typically seeing across the board. Limited resources, skeleton crews behind the scenes. We see this not only in casinos, this is pretty much the mantra throughout public and private as well. IT teams are just limited. Third-party risks. Many of you who have been working for a casino are probably using a software that was built for the gaming floors. Those typically are very buggy. So bugs being introduced, just third-party risk in general, supply chain risk. Are humans. Humans are often the weakest link, right? The bad guys know that. That's why the adversaries are always targeting the humans. So making sure that we are educating our users so that they can be successful, so they know what to look out for. Gaps in regulations. The guys will talk a little bit about some of the regulational gaps. We talk a little bit, I like to talk a little bit about the NIGC here when we talk about limited cybersecurity program and risk beyond compliance. So about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I think the NIGC started to introduce some cybersecurity guidance. I'd say it's, the guidance is good. I'd say it's a little light. It's, I'd say maybe Cybersecurity 101. There's a lot of areas in compliance that will cover something general, right? It needs to cast a wide net. Now, some of these regulations, some of these advisories are definitely legit. However, there's a lot of areas that they miss. Here, what we typically note is that the NIGC, if that's your only source of cybersecurity, then you're missing out on some of the more important things that make up a cyber program. Things like network security, auditing and monitoring. They don't talk much about IDS, IPS. Employee training, they kind of mention it, but it's more of an optional item that really should not be optional. Incident response, ransomware readiness, tabletop exercises, little bit of conversation there, nothing that's dictated. Again, we talk about the third-party risk. Vulnerability management, not something that they're really tub thumping as a must-have, is definitely a must-have. And then, just getting guidance outside of compliance. There's that term, you can be compliant, but not secure. And that's exactly kind of what we're talking about here. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what should we be doing? The goal with any organization, whether you're a casino, whether you're a hospital, is to have a security program. And that's the mindset we want to have here. Security program, a mature security program, or what we sometimes refer to as a reasonable security program, needs to be designed, it needs to be matured, it needs to be tailored for the organization. Three main pillars make up that program: risk management, governance, and compliance. And then everything that flows underneath that. And so as a casino, as an organization, if you're in charge of security or you're a part of the security operations, we always want to be targeting on, is our security program mature? Is it right-sized for us? Is it tailored for us? And how do we know that? How do we measure our performance? How do we measure our maturation? Well, that's by working with cybersecurity companies or third-party experts that can come in, assess your program, and build you a roadmap. We all need to have a security roadmap, or we need to have a security risk register, an inherent risk register, and a residual risk register. And we need to make sure that we have a good idea of the severity, the probability and likelihood of all of the risks to the organization, so we know how to prioritize what risks and initiatives that we should be taking on that is going to reduce the largest percentage of risk, because risk is a game of percentages. So get an assessment done by a third party outside of, just working off of compliance. Get a roadmap conducted. That roadmap will be conducted at the end of an assessment. This is what we do at Bird Rock Systems. all of your findings are prioritized by severity. Start doing more red teaming. Pen testing should be absolutely done. Pen testing is a must-have. Tabletop exercises. I can't stress tabletop exercises enough. Get someone like a virtual CISO, someone like myself, somebody that does this day in and day out to assist you with building out that program, helping you to plan for success so that you can measure the performance, helping you to be able to have that communication upstream so that you can train and you can teach upper management or the tribal committees on the importance of cybersecurity, be able to talk their language, which is business impact, which is typically in being able to correlate risk versus dollars. And then also, you still want to be in that compliance space. You're always going to be in that compliance space. But what we want to look for is what is the gap between compliance versus risk? And that is where we're noticing that a lot of tribal casinos get into trouble, is that they're doing some basic work. It's mostly dictated from compliance, but there's a lot of risk that the compliance misses, and a lot of times that leaves you open to risk. So this is my last slide. My big takeaway here is engage with cybersecurity experts, whether it's us, whether it's somebody else, and get an assessment done. It should be done annually. Have yourself a roadmap that has all of your initiatives prioritized by severity, and then start working with a virtual CISO to build out a risk register, and incrementally start putting in these changes to mature the program and reduce the risk to your casino. All right, that's it for me. I think we're going to turn this over to Fabio. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, my name is Fabio. I'm with Bird Rock since 2022, but I've been working in this industry for more than 30 years in cybersecurity as a security cloud engineer and for compliance as a data protection officer. And today I want to explore how tribal casinos can align their cybersecurity and compliance programs with both regulatory requirements and modern risk-based frameworks. So tribal and commercial casinos face high exposure to fraud and money laundering, given the constant flow of money and the opportunities for illicit transactions. They also handle sensitive customer data, such as personal identification, payment card information, and know your customer records. The industry operates 24/7 and relies on a wide variety of integrated systems, including payments, gaming platform, surveillance, and security, which creates a large attack surface, of course. This makes compliance and security alignment not just important, but essential. Next slide. And yeah, so the regulatory environment for tribal gaming is layered and unique. The IGRA, or IGRA, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, provide the legal basis that allows tribals to operate casinos on tribal lands. And under IGRA, the National Indian Gaming Commission enforces the minimum internal control standards, which ensure financial integrity and fairness in all operations. So each tribal also has a compact with its state government, defining the specific terms for gaming oversight, taxation, and auditing. And finally, technical validation for organizations like GLI ensure systems operate reliably and fairly. So understanding these frameworks helps align cybersecurity and compliance efforts. Next slide. Okay. So beyond gaming, casino gaming regulations, casino must adopt recognized information security frameworks. For example, ISO 27001 provides a management system for information security. The NIST cybersecurity framework helps casinos identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from threats. The PCI DSS for sure is crucial for protecting cardholder data in payment processing. And SOC 2 ensures controls around security, availability, and confidentiality. And together, these frameworks strengthen security posture and assure stakeholders that strong governance is in place. Next slide.
Here's kind of where some of my material comes in, Fabio. I had to put myself in your story flow, so I apologize if that disrupts you a little bit. So my name is Stephen Goodrow. I've spent almost 30 years in IT. I describe myself as a recovering engineer. I used to be a network engineer, and then I worked at Tipping Point for over a decade where I did absolutely everything there, including threat research. And where I kind of want to start with is this diagram. It's very complicated and frightening, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm going to show you ways that you can leverage some of the information to help achieve these better outcomes and present the risk to your leadership. Now, what I'd like to cover is there's a foundational part of our tech stack that was never designed to run securely, which is basically all of it. And we've built the tech stack in stratified systems. So every time a new smart device comes on, it's very chatty, it likes to talk a lot, and it uses the communication portion of the tech stack. Well, that portion was never designed to run securely, and it's been empowered to make decisions that you may or may not be aware of, and it may or may not report. And that's kind of a big challenge because you can't really protect what you can't see. So what we have here is a solution that can sit on the communication stack, and it can passively observe traffic on the network. We could either feed that traffic to tools for specific analysis, or we can passively observe and create telemetry. And then there's a lot you can do with that telemetry, just like you have cameras inside the casino. This is basically cameras on the network or in the communication tech stack. Now, I'm only going to focus on two particular risk frameworks for the interest of time. But I'm kind of hoping you walk away with some seeds of ideas of how you can proceed and leverage what you already have without necessarily understanding the bits and bytes of what you're seeing here in front of you. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with the GLI standards. These are for gaming devices, and I was unfamiliar with them at first, but I did a little bit of digging, and they basically give you a minimum set of security for how your gaming devices should be protected and configured. Now, the goal here isn't just to achieve compliance or security. However, compliance is a great place to start if you don't know where to go security-wise, because it's been I've realized over the years when looking at all of these risk and compliance frameworks, they all kind of say the same thing. They all kind of lead to good governance. Now, they may focus on different sets of data. For example, the GLI standards is about gaming devices themselves. PCI is around credit card information. But for the most part, they want to make sure that everything's encrypted and there are some guardrails in place. Now, when it comes to the gaps that we have in modern organizations, I've there's been a rapid evolution in the industry, from my perspective, on ways to close that gap. And one of them is to leverage generative AI. It can turn a tier one analyst into a tier three analyst. It can also look at very complicated cyber events or logging, and it can then reduce that to the risk that you may have. It could then map it to a particular control, and it can give you a severity as to what needs to be done right away. The other differences that we have in some of the compliance frameworks is the reporting mechanism. They all have some kind of reporting mechanism, and that varies. And some of them also have potential fines that come with them. The GLI standard does not appear to have any kind of fine that comes with it that I saw, but we're going to step through some examples of what you can get if you monitor the communication stack and then map that to these particular compliance frameworks. So next slide, please. Or advance it by one. So here we go. I have a lab with lots of interesting things chatting back and forth on them. And I went ahead and I fed that lab's traffic, the telemetry, and I fed it into one of my AI systems, and I asked it to map what it saw to the GLI system. And the first thing I noticed was GLI 19 seems to be focused on external communications. I have a number of external communications trying to reach internally. I have almost 500,000 connections from China, Russia, and Iran. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but actually it is a bad thing, right? Because if you're doing a gaming in the United States, are you really gaming? Do you really have customers in Russia or China? So here are some basic controls where you can block some of that traffic and reduce your risk. Now, if I were to go to management or a board of directors and show them the network traffic log, that's meaningless to them. But if I tell them that they have risk along geographical lines on access, then that's something that makes more sense to them. Now, you don't necessarily need to know what all this means. And that's one of the beautiful parts of AI. Now, if we look at GL I-19, we do have one area where we are compliant. We have met the minimum level of encryption for some internal communications. So now I know that's not necessarily a focus of where I want to start. Now, GLI 33 deals specifically with internal communications. And here we have some things that require review. It's maybe not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something we should be aware of. Advanced one, please. And one more. There we go. So here it gave us, there we go. Here it gave us the top 5 problems that we potentially have that we need to investigate. Now, the reason I wanted to use the network telemetry is because it's something that exists in every organization, whether you're a school district, whether you're a hospital, whether you're a gas station. If you have a smart device, you have something on there that's chatting. And if you could observe its behavior, then you're able to map it and measure risk. And find any kind of operational inefficiencies in the system. So in this case, we seem to have somebody from India who's trying to connect every 2 seconds to us. And we have some various data flows that we're not really familiar with, in addition to our almost 500,000 connections from Russia and China. Now, these threat actors, they're financially motivated. They don't care who they hit. They're looking for soft, easy targets. And while you may not necessarily be opposed to certain kinds of regulation, once they figure out that they can hit you, they have a stratified system where they will inform others, and they're going to start looking as well. They're really sophisticated. They know how much you earn per day, per hour, per month, and they're going to ask for something small, trivial, maybe 1% of your revenue for the year. And if you're bringing in 44 billion, that's a lot of money. So advance one, please. So here we have some immediate recommendations on what you can do. And if you look at the bottom there, we have a compliance score. Now, this is of course, simulated data because I wanted something interesting to show, but we can see that, we have some level of protection and compliance in place, but there's some areas to go. And, in the next 24 hours, here's what we should probably look at right away. And then, of course, for the next 1 to 3 months. This helps generate a roadmap, of actions you should take, and you can communicate it to the C-level or to the board and make it understandable to them. Remember that diagram up front? You don't need to know anything about that. This helps kind of frame what you're seeing, what's happening in that complicated diagram. Advance one, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about PCI. The first framework we talked about was around controls for gaming devices. PCI is around credit card information, and no nation enforces PCI. The banking industry does, however. And if you handle credit card information, the banking industry will make sure that you are PCI compliant. PCI has a narrow focus around credit card data. Anything that touches it, any machine that touches it, any user that touches it is in scope. So right away, if you stop and think a moment, if you have a wide open communication layer where anything can talk to anything, then your entire organization is in scope. But if I can start observing where my point of sale is and start segmenting it off, I can reduce the scope of compliance and reduce the cost of it. PCI does have ongoing reporting requirements. And one of the interesting things I noted about PCI is there's nothing in there particularly around performance. Do point of sale machines have to perform? However, the reality is if you can't process the credit card transaction of time, if you can't process the bet in time, you lose the business to a competitor and you potentially pay a fine. And if you're dealing with some of these buggy internal gaming systems that weren't really designed to run to have a high degree of resiliency, if they start having problems, that can be very, very difficult to troubleshoot. So in addition to highlighting risk, we can highlight performance problems or operational inefficiencies within the system that are causing delay, and delay is poor user experience. Now, I'm not going to dig too deep into any other frameworks simply in the interest of time, but as we go through more, I'm going to kind of say the same thing. So can we advance one, please? Using the same network telemetry as before in the previous slides, this is the exact same data, except now I'm mapping it to the 12 controls of PCI. PC has R1 through R12, requirement 1 through requirement 12. Now, this is the kind of view you may want to give leadership because we have a risk score that the system was able to identify based on what's going on, right? I do not want connections from Russia or China connecting to any point of sale or PCI network. Before, we did have a green checkbox on our encryption. However, PCI mandates a higher level of encryption than what the gaming standard does. And we've identified almost 300 communications that weren't at the proper encryption level. So that needs to be looked at. And here we're kind of merging the two previous frameworks. We have both external and internal. We have some unusual access for databases on the inside. I'm not going to read through all of this, but on R10, on the network monitoring requirement, we have a green checkbox. Well, that's great. So now I know that I have some level where to start and where to focus. So let's advance one. Again, just like the other framework, it gives us an immediate things we need to do right now. Now, here it found some traffic from KP. I don't know where KP is, but it's the same traffic we have from China, Russia, Iran. And here are some things we should do immediately, along with some 60, 90, 180-day things we need to take care of. Compliance is kind of one of those things that once you know about it, you're obligated to do something about it, depending on the framework. And we're going to look a little bit at the business driver of do nothing versus having the fines or the remediation penalties that could come with this. Because again, this is the banking industry that will enforce this upon you. So next slide. Now, PCI does come with financial fines, and if you have a data breach, it could be 5 million to much, much higher. Particular forms of compliance will have a daily fee, so you may want to weigh the remediation versus risk, and eventually the cost will be high enough where remediation makes more sense, right? And then, as we saw earlier on, the reputational damage that can't really be measured. But here are some areas where to focus. If I were to take that network telemetry and that map from previous, and I would show that to a board, they wouldn't understand. But if I showed them this is something that would make a lot more sense. And here we have them rated from highest priority to lowest priority, and we've specified which particular requirements they are. Again, you don't necessarily need to know all of this. What I'm simply showing you is if you have a security camera that's monitoring the traffic on the network, that kind of information is very enriching for these kinds of risk frameworks, and cost can be measured to it. Now, we don't have specific costs because I don't have your revenue numbers, but if we did, we could plug in very specific. The fines are very prescriptive based on how much you process per day. Next, please. So I think it's back to you, Fabio.
Yeah, back to me. Thank you, Stephen. Audits oversight in tribal gaming. Okay, so audit readiness should be an ongoing effort. While NIGC and the state regulators traditionally focus on financial audits, they now also expect to see evidence of strong cybersecurity practices as well. This includes vulnerability scans, patch management records, identity access logs, incident response drills, and vendor risk assessments, and others. The tribal gaming commissions are the tribal regulatory agencies responsible for overseeing and enforcing game laws within each tribal's jurisdictions, and they play a vital role in maintaining local compliance and ensuring that IT and security teams document their controls properly. Having these artifacts ready can reduce audit friction and demonstrate maturity. Next slide, please. Yes. So when we talk about compliance in tribal casinos, the key is integrated approach. So instead of managing NIGC, GLI, ISO, NIST, and other frameworks separately, casinos should map all regulation to common controls, creating a single compliance matrix. And this avoids duplication and ensures no requirements are missed. And a strong compliance program also depends on regular audits and continuous staff training, as Jeremy mentioned before. Audits validate that policies work in practice, while training keeps everyone aware, because people remain the first line of defense against fraud, phishing, and insider threats. So integration, oversight, and awareness together transform compliance from a checklist into a culture of accountability and security. Next slide. Okay. So yeah, what are the benefits? So the benefits of compliance go far beyond avoiding fines, penalties. A well-structured cybersecurity and compliance program enhances reputation and trust with partners, regulators, and of course, customers. When players know their data and funds are secure, loyalty growth. So a strong compliance also enables innovation. It gives leadership confidence to adopt new technologies like mobile apps or digital payments very safely. Next, yeah, what are my next steps? Okay, so the path forward is to take a risk-based approach, focusing resources where the biggest risks are, while still meeting all compliance requirements that you need to meet. So frameworks like NIST, ISO, PCI should be seen as guides and not checklists. They need to be adapted to fit each casino's unique operations and culture. So you don't need to use all the controls from all the frameworks. And finally, and very important, investing in both technology and training. So we make sure that systems and people work together to protect the organization's assets, operations, and reputation. Yeah, I will close this with the thought: compliance sets the minimum bar, but true resilience requires a proactive mindset. Over to you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Fabio. So closing this out, let's kind of summarize what we've talked about today. We've talked a lot about compliance. We talked a lot about cybersecurity, how cybersecurity can actually go beyond compliance. Compliance is a good starting point, but we really want to take that risk-based approach, right? And what we're talking about is a holistic approach. So as we talked about, what is that security program? You remember that slide? We've got risk, we've got governance, we've got compliance. If we don't have all three, then we're not optimal, right? We need to be focused on all three of those to really mature a secure program, that cybersecurity program. Now, a program is typically built and designed based off of our risk tolerance, right? What is our appetite for risk? Understanding that is extremely important. And if we don't assess our environments, if we don't understand purely where the risk is to the organization, both from risk, governance, and compliance, and communicate that to the board, to the powers to be, then we will never know what is our tolerance for risk, what is our appetite for risk, and we won't be able to develop a reasonable security program. So I wanted to kind of leave this with a few things, right? Technology and people, right? And the technology, the reason we have Gigamon here today is a lot of these casinos do not have the visibility into their networks that they want to have. There's a lot of gaps, right? And that's because they've done best practices. They've segmented their environments, which is what they should be doing, but that also causes a lot of blind spots, right? And so meeting with organizations, meeting with casinos nowadays, what do they want? What's the biggest, one of the biggest questions asked? I want full visibility into the network. I want to see things from the packet layer. I want to know what's going on at the hotel network, in our gaming partition, on the other side of the house, right? The IT, the operational side of the house, what's going on at the gas station, the hospital, the school, everything, right? We want to be able to have that single pane of glass there to get that visibility into what's happening. And they want to run things like a fabric, right? We want to run things like the cloud is running. Make it a lot easier, segmentation's easier. So a lot of that is what casinos today are asking about. And they're worried. They're worried about ransomware. What are we missing? What don't we know? That's why we assess. That's why we bring in companies like BirdRock, Gigamon to help them assess and to understand where's your blind spot? What is the thing that you don't know? What is the probability and likelihood of the risk that you have today that we should eradicate, that we should treat? And how do we communicate that to upper management so they understand risk? They understand the impact to the organization if we do nothing, right? And help them to understand why we invest in our cybersecurity programs and why we bring in experts to assist. So I'm going to leave it at that. I do encourage everyone to reach out to us if you've been working in that mindset of, well, we're doing some compliance and that's how we've built our program, but we're not 100% sure about our program, the maturation of it, if it's working per what the business can tolerate from a risk perspective. So I'll leave it there. We're going to open this up to some questions that you guys might have, and we'll hang around for, I think we've got about 12 minutes here for Q&A.
Yes, we do. So if you guys have any questions, make sure you put those in the chat, or you can use the Q&A if you don't want to put it up here publicly. But, one of the questions I had is, what is, from your perspective in working with tribes for, especially of recent, what is, one security or compliance requirement that you're seeing tribes struggle with, and how, what would be a more strategic approach to that?
Yeah, so I can take that. So what I am seeing with the tribes, and it's very different between different tribes. They all don't run the same. Some are not allowed to work in the cloud. Some can use the cloud. Some can go use vendors that they want. Others are not able to use vendors because there's strong initiatives that you have to assess the vendors. But I'll tell you what I see where the tribes are struggling. And to be honest, it's where a lot of the other just industries struggle as well. Compliance is usually separated at the end of the day by two things: technology and governance. I see the governance side of the house always a big problem with tribes, right? So, and that's because when we start our security program, when we start building this out, we were worried about risk and we're focused on risk. So we look at the risk side of the house and we say, well, how do we reduce risk? Well, we're going to reduce it by bringing in a security stack. So we're going to bring in the technology, and that's it, right? And so what they miss is sub-programs, and you can't really build sub-programs and build people and processes effectively without having documentation, without having governance documents, policies, procedures, guidelines. And that's the area that I see casinos struggle with the most, is the governing documentation.
Mm-hmm. Another question I had was, what do you think the biggest misconception is about implementing a cybersecurity framework like NIST or?
Well, I think that what is prohibiting a lot of the tribal casinos is their solvency.
Mm,
It's they some of them take this attitude of if something were to happen, you know what, we're a little bit safe because of our sovereignty. And we don't need to do that because we're sovereign. So that has been a big issue. We have to be preventative, and that's what we're trying to preach here. And that's what some casinos do and some casinos don't. Some casinos want to be preventative. They're able to communicate that appropriately and say, let's go outside of, you know, what we're being told by the NIGC or some of the light compliance, cybersecurity compliance that's coming from the tribal community. And let's go into something a little more stringent. Let's follow a actual cybersecurity framework like NIST. And so they'll go to upper management and they'll either say yes or no, we don't need to do that because we're sovereign and we don't understand the need for it.
mhm.
So I'd like to chime in on that a minute because I'm in Singapore right now at a security conference, and a lot of other nation states do take the lead on some of the processes and formats that the United States puts into place. So they will either use NIST as is, or they will build upon it themselves. So this isn't necessarily I don't want to do it because I don't have to. Those who are interested in security, a lot of the heavy lifting has already been done in this framework, and other nation states are also building upon it and using it as a foundation as well.
Mhm. Interesting. Well, thank you so much, you guys. I don't see any other questions or comments coming in. So if you have any final thoughts before we wrap up today's webinar.
Yeah, I put it in the chat for everybody who joined today. We have the opportunity to contribute to BirdRock's industry report. We're building out a report to highlight insights, trends that we're seeing, whether that's cybersecurity related, cloud infrastructure, privacy and compliance for the tribal and gaming casino industry. So you can scan the QR code here. I also put the link in the chat for you guys to fill out this survey and to contribute to our wonderful industry report and then be entered to win a $500 gift card. So with that, thank you again, TribalHub, for having us. And thank you for Stephen, Fabio, and Jeremy for presenting today. And thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. All right, you guys have a great afternoon and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.